and such forth, and improvising all sorts of fun things to say, and going on and continuing to talk about what I've been up to and my various exploits. And
yes, and
yes, the key to any good improv is to keep things going and never shut anybody down and work off of what they did and build on it and go somewhere with it and ramble.
Yes, but we're here to talk about science.
Precisely.
And we are recording now.
Oh, we are?
Yeah, because I got the levels where I wanted.
Okay, cool, yeah. Well, I love talking about science.
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Welcome, you are listening to Science Sort of. This is episode 273, and our theme this week is plainly put, GSA 2017 Part 1. I'm your host, Ryan Haupt, and joining me to discuss things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science, but mostly just helping me do the intro-outro bits for the interviews, is Dr. Professor Charlie Barnhart.
Happy to help out and hope to be on the show longer soon.
Yeah, you didn't deign to come down to GSA this year, even though it was in your neck of the woods, because I guess you're not really a geologist anymore.
And I have these other responsibilities, like 150 students and 2 offspring to keep alive.
So all good reasons.
And I'm not really a geologist anymore either, but I miss it.
Even when you were a geologist, I'm guessing AGU was more your meeting.
Yes, that's certainly true.
So let's explain. GSA is the Geological Society of America. They're a scientific society based out of Boulder, Colorado, I think, and one of the larger ones. And they're an organization I've been a member of for a while. It was actually the GSA Portland meeting was where I presented my first poster ever back in the day.
Cool.
And yeah, every year they have a big annual meeting. Every couple of years it's in Denver, but the years it's not in Denver, it's in all kinds of other places. And this year it was in Seattle. And so using that as an excuse to get closer to Charlie, I flew out to Seattle, microphone in hand, and ran around coercing mostly my friends into giving me interviews. And then went up to see Charlie for a day.
I did present a talk at a GSA meeting, but it was in Brisbane, and it wasn't the Society of America, it was the Society of Australia.
Ah. Yeah, there's not as much Martian stuff at GSA. There's some, but AGU, which is the American Geophysical Union, which I'll also be trying to cover in about a month, they tend to do more of the space side of Earth science.
Right. And I was doing energy talks, and both AGU and GSA are concerned with energy because geologists are the cause and solution to our many environmental problems.
Yeah. Our first interview doesn't have anything to do with energy and everything to do with dinosaurs, because GSA, while not as focused on paleontology as meetings like the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, it does draw in a lot of paleontologists, because if you study fossil plants or trace fossils or fossil invertebrates, so anything not covered under the vertebrate part of vertebrate paleontology, this is one of your big meetings. And my friend, now friend, but originally somebody I met because he's a listener to the show, Khai Button, was at GSA because he's kind of local to that region, and was able to talk to me about his talk where he looks at the skulls of modern birds to figure out how to reconstruct beak shape in dinosaurs.
Cool.
Which is pretty sweet. So we're going to listen to that now. Okay, so I'm being joined by Khai Button, who is a Ph.D. candidate at North Carolina State University, but currently living in Washington State and you're in the same boat as I am. We're both finishing our dissertations. And I don't know how you discovered the show, but we met because you were a listener to the show a couple of years ago and have become friends. And I've been trying to get you on the show for a while now. And you ran out of excuses. So today is the day.
Today is the day. It finally happened. Yeah. So the story about how I came to the show was my brother, who listened to a lot of podcasts, is like, hey, I heard about this podcast where they talk about paleontology and beer. So that, I don't know why you're not already a listener. And I asked myself the same question, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Oh my God, this guy's a paleontologist, so that means we're like colleagues. And I heard you talking about going to Berlin. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in Berlin.
That's right. That's where we met, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then when we were meeting for drinks that night, my colleagues were like, so how long do you guys know each other? I'm like, oh, we met today.
But then we went out and got Italian food in Berlin.
Yeah, exactly.
It was good. So you gave a talk earlier this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do a talk or a poster at SVP this year?
I gave a talk at SVP this year.
Okay,
yeah.
well, on the same subject matter, or?
No, so my talk here at GSA was about citizen science and working with middle and high school students to digitize our fossil collections. And that's what's been paying my salary for the last year, has been working on that project. My talk at SVP was about my own research for my dissertation about the relationship between the texture, the surface texture of the bones of bird beaks and the soft tissue that overlies them, with the purpose of hopefully trying to reconstruct beaks in extinct birds and in extinct non-avian dinosaurs.
Like, give me an example of a extinct non-avian dinosaur that has a beak.
So one of my favorite examples are the Therizinosaurians.
Yeah, they have beaks?
Oh yeah. So we don't have a lot of skull material from them, but the ones we do have a fully edentulous premaxilla, like in Erlikosaurus.
All right, let's slow down.
Sorry.
Fully edentulous.
Yes.
Means
so
toothless.
there's no teeth at all in the front bone of the mouth. Yeah.
Right, and the premaxillary region is the very front of the mouth.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I get kind of carried away there.
No. This is my job as the interviewer to slow you down and
Yeah.
make sure you define things.
Yep.
Okay, so I didn't know that we didn't have much skull material from Therizinosaurs. Therizinosaurs are the dinosaurs we've actually talked about them. We've talked about them on the show recently, and they're the ones that have the really long claws on their
Ridiculously long,
forelimbs,
yeah.
and I think sort of operated like the ground sloths of the Mesozoic.
Yeah, we don't know for sure what the claws were for. I sat through a really interesting talk that did finite element analysis to kind of model stress dissipation on the claws, and they would totally suck at grabbing, poking, or digging. So
A little bit like termite mounds, though.
maybe,
Yeah, like anteater style.
yeah. So, but there's no reason for them to be that big. There's probably some sexual selection involved as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so they have beaks, and many other species have beaks, including the ostrich mimic dinosaurs, like Ornithomimus.
Ornithomimus, yeah.
Yep. And there's plenty of non-theropod dinosaurs that have them too, like Triceratops is a great example. Everyone
Right,
loves
but they still have a
Triceratops.
big dental battery behind the beak,
Right.
so they're only edentulous in the front.
Yeah. Well, that's a fun part of this. Of my research question is there's no living animal that has both a beak and teeth, so it's really hard to figure out what.
Duck-billed platypus, done. What if I just drop the mic and
Yeah,
interview
but
over?
duck-billed platypuses don't have
A true beak.
Yeah, it's alpha keratin, not beta keratin. So it's a different material with different properties. So a platypus's beak is a lot more flexible. It's more
Right.
like hair than it is like a horny beak.
Yeah.
So and so we have no real way of figuring out how the beak and the teeth work together, where there's no extant analog of an animal that's set up like that. And so it's really hard to predict what they would like in life and how they, did their deal. So
Because the idea, if I understand correctly, is that having like a narrow beak allows you to have very precise selection of food items. And then they have this, if we're talking about like Triceratops, they have this really intense dental battery, which basically just means a lot of teeth that are good for grinding. So they would carefully select something and then just grind the hell out of it before swallowing it and digesting it.
Yeah, I mean, we have coprolites and things from animals that had dental batteries, like hadrosaurs and that sort of thing. And we can tell that they ate a bunch of like really low quality food, sticks and bark and stuff like that. And so to be able to process a lot of it would be necessary for them to get the energy they need from the food they ate.
Right, yeah. So you have to evolve some way to process it. You can do it either dentally, or you can have a stomach that's really complicated. Or you can have a really long retention time, like sloths.
And so that's why I'm interested in theropod dinosaurs with beaks, because none of them have dental batteries. So they were not great chewers of food. They had to find a way to kind of overcome that.
Which is not a terribly surprising distinction between herbivores and carnivores.
Right.
Meat is generally considered easier to digest than plants.
Yeah. And all of these beaked theropods, we think, come from a common meat-eating ancestor and then further differentiated to eat different things. Possibly once they achieved that beak, it allowed them to...
There was an explosion of diversity once the beak came into play. Oviraptors, are they in that group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they're one of the weirdest skulled dinosaurs. If you look at the skull, you'd think that it was on backwards. That's how weird they look.
Really?
Yeah. So you show a person a picture of an oviraptor skull, and the back of the head looks like a mouth, and the front of the head looks like a box.
For many years, the moose antlers on the brachiopods were on backwards.
Yes.
But then our designer was like, that was a dumb joke and it doesn't work, and he fixed it for us. So thank you, Thomas, for doing that.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to talk about what you found in your research, or do you want to talk about? Yeah, let's get.
Yeah.
Let's
So
get into it.
I actually had some fairly promising findings looking at these modern birds. I did find that there was a fairly strong and predictive correlation between the porosity, so the number of holes for blood vessels and for nerves in the surface of the beak, and the actual thickness of the keratin on top of the beak in those areas. And there was also some relationship between that porosity and actually how long past the end of the beak the keratin would extend. And it seems that there's a positive correlation. So the
increased vascularization and what would the term for vascularization be for nerves? Innervation.
Yes.
Increased vascularization and innervation meant bigger beak structures.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty consistent across all the birds I looked at. And I looked at
So this is all modern birds you're looking at.
all modern birds so far. Although I have extinct birds in my sample, some with the outline of keratin and most of them without.
I wonder, people should write in if this is surprising for them to hear, but I feel like people who understand that birds are dinosaurs think about it just being like a changeover. We went from having dinosaurs to having birds, but really, like, there were birds around in the Cretaceous, like, flying around being birds, while there were still like tyrannosaurs and triceratops.
There were many different types of birds. There were types of birds that are now extinct. That's a big one.
That's the famous one. It's like a diving bird. It looks like a what's the diving bird today?
I can't remember.
Shoot, I know it too.
Yeah.
I just saw them the other day. Keep talking.
Okay, I had the good fortune of visiting
Cormorant. That's what I'm thinking.
There you go. Yeah, I went to the.
I didn't actually look it up. I'm just looking at pictures of soup that we were debating about at lunch. But just opening my phone did the trick. And,
nice.
and
that process to help me remember it. Yeah. I went to the Tianyu Museum in Shandong province in China, and they have, I want to say, 300 specimens of Confucius ornis sanctus. The most anywhere in the world. It's like the largest dinosaur museum anywhere, and just so many of them that all died in lakes and were perfectly preserved with feathers, and some of them even have like organs and stuff. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So point being,
yes,
I would be interested to learn if people were surprised to hear that there are a bunch of birds that are extinct that are not like non-avian dinosaurs. So you were looking at modern birds, some extinct birds. So what were the kinds of modern birds you were looking at?
So I tried to be sample as broadly as possible. So I went to the National Museum in Washington, D.C. and the Field Museum in Chicago, and between the two of them, they basically have all of the bird diversity on modern planet Earth.
And bird diversity, I mean, it's a lot of diversity.
Yeah.
They're one of the most diverse vertebrate groups, right?
They are the most diverse group of vertebrates that live on land.
Tetrapods.
Yeah, tetrapods. And
it's hard to outdo fish. Fish are just
yeah.
Osteichthyans. Like once you're in the Osteichthyes world, there's really a lot of diversity.
But birds do pretty well. There's over 10,000 species of birds, and I obviously couldn't sample all of those. So what I decided to do was try and hit one bird from every family of birds.
How many families is that?
It's about 140, depending on how you count them.
Wow.
I didn't quite manage that. I got about 105 families from those two research trips. And so I'm trying to look at just representative sample of all birds by looking at one per family, roughly.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so how do you actually measure the amount of porosity? Like, what was the technique that you were employing?
Yeah, so I took pictures with a digital camera and with a digital microscope. We have a portable microscope, and I took pictures of the lateral surface of the beak, so just like the side, and took ImageJ, which is a pretty standard photo manipulation software. And
free for anybody who wants it.
I know, right? And I used their area measure tool. Oh, I forgot to mention, in paint.net, which is like the free version of Photoshop because I'm cheap, I colored in visible pores that I could see on the side of the beak, just colored them bright red so they would easily stand out in the ImageJ images, and then I just hit the area tool.
You can actually automate that in ImageJ.
Probably can, yeah.
I've done some stuff on rock thin sections where I wanted to estimate percent matrix versus percent classed, and so you can teach ImageJ like a threshold for like a darkness lightness threshold, and then it'll just make the whole image black and white and all your pores.
Oh yeah, I did see that. I'm thinking about trying that when I continue to process more specimens. But I wanted to account for beak length because there was a huge range of beak sizes, all the way from tiny hummingbirds that the whole body fits in the palm of your hand to the African shoebill, which has a huge skull as long as my arm or my forearm and keratin almost half an inch thick. Just ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why is it so thick?
Well, they are ferocious predators of land vertebrates. They will dismember frogs.
They're a ferocious
lizards.
looking bird.
Yeah, they always look so angry. Look at them; they look like they're gonna murder you.
There are a couple of shoebills and a hummingbird on display at an exhibit at Smithsonian that my wife worked on. So I've seen a lot of shoebills recently because they're these two just menacing looking birds. And then they have it's a hummingbird femur next to an apatosaur femur.
Wow.
So they're showing like these are closely related animals.
Yeah, I mean more closely than a lot of things. Yeah.
But look at the size difference. So okay, so you sampled all these different birds. You took the images. So that's how you characterize the amount of porosity.
Yeah, and then I just divided it by beak length, and to get this porosity index, which is basically a number for every bird species. That's how porous their beak is, and compared that to the average keratin thickness and the extent of the rhampotheca, the keratin sheath, in comparison to the extent of the bone. And yeah, I found that the more porous the beak is, the thicker the keratin is going to be, and the longer the beak is. And that makes some intuitive sense to me because
you need more resources to get something big like that to grow.
Yeah, keratin is a living tissue. It's not like hair. Hair is
keratin,
the tip is dead. Yeah, the keratin of the beak is alive, except for the outermost layer, and so it has to be able to feed it a blood supply, and it's sensitive to the outside world. That's how birds interact with their environment primarily, is they touch things with their beaks.
Did you see the video going around about the guy drumming and his little parakeet like drums his
that's adorable. No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, so like the guy like starts a beat, and like birds are pretty good at figuring out songs, and so like this parakeet just comes to headbanging on the drum with him in time, and it's really cute. Yeah, nice.
I have to look that up. Yeah, but that's one of the reasons I'm interested in looking at beaks, is that's like the first thing that a bird interacts with the world is via the head, via the beak, and they'd use it for everything that we use our hands for, in addition to it being their mouths.
Right. So. Yeah. Because they don't have hands; they have wings. I guess some birds are good at manipulating stuff with their feet, but even like the tool building birds, they're still just using their beak to build tools. All the corvids.
Yeah, exactly. They're frighteningly intelligent.
Oh yeah, I saw some crows. Ravens, crows. I'm still terrible at telling the difference. I think they were crows. I don't think they were big enough to be ravens.
Yeah, ravens are huge.
Yeah, I saw them out in the yard, like messing with the squirrels. And speaking of, we were talking about learning to cook different kinds of things. Yes. I had been trying my hand at like a authentic-ish version of like a Kung Pao chicken.
Oh, nice.
The peanuts I had, I guess, were old, and Julie complained that like, oh, these peanuts don't taste very good. And so I've been keeping these peanuts in my car outside, so that if I see these crows again, I'm going to start feeding them peanuts so they'll recognize me, and then I'll start developing my corvid army.
Of course, yes.
Because they recognize faces and stuff.
They do, like and there's people they like and there's people they don't like.
I know, and I want them to like me, so I have...
So when the uprising occurs, they'll spare you or save you for last. Yeah.
Save me from the squirrels.
Yeah, there's records of ravens training humans to hunt for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they will alert you to the presence of prey that they cannot kill themselves, but they know that humans are capable of killing.
They do. I mean, they do that with wolves too.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, dolphins do that with fishermen. Like, animals are good at... If there's one thing animals are good at, it's exploiting humans to get food for themselves.
Yes. I mean, just look at domesticated cats and dogs. We totally...
but here's what I've been thinking about for a while. I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before, and you're behind it listening, so you wouldn't be able to tell me. But with these crows and ravens that are like training the wolf packs, where the birds do aerial reconnaissance, right? And so the pack knows to follow the birds to find the food, and then they'll let the bird eat at the kill site with them. So let's fast forward 10,000 years. Now there's a version of dogs that are domesticated by dinosaurs. And then we've got our dogs. And then the war happens in my sci-fi script. Oh boy. Dino dog versus human dog.
On Mars.
Maybe on Mars. I could see putting it on Mars.
10,000 years? Yeah. Who knows? That's when we went, I don't know if you listened to the episode we recorded with the Jurassic Park Minute. Shout out if you guys are listening. But but my friend Haviv, they were asking him, do you think Jurassic Park will happen? He's like, well, we could theoretically create a species from whole cloth. We don't have to bring back extinct species. We could make brand new ones, but we shouldn't do it here on Earth because we'll screw up our own biology. So let's go to a dead world like Mars and create them there.
No, I disagree. I mean, I did hear that episode, but I disagree. I think we should go to Mars as a species and leave Earth as the nature preserve.
Ah, there you go. Yeah.
And then all of our experiments can just hang out here on Earth.
Yeah.
And then we'll get some sort of M. Night Shyamalan After Earth scenario.
Only better movie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I hate that movie.
I didn't even bother to see it. It did not look good. So so that's really cool in the research side of things. And then how far are you in the process of comparing that to dinosaurs? Or are you still, is that the next step?
Yeah, so that's going to be chapter 4 of my dissertation. I'm writing chapter 3 right now, so stay tuned.
Okay.
But I see that the same techniques I'm using for these modern birds should be applicable to these extinct dinosaurs. That was my entire goal with this project was to be able to make some hypotheses and test them with extinct animals. So it's coming along.
Cool. And then let's talk about this outreach project.
Yeah. So
I guess here's my first question.
Yes.
You mentioned that it's about digitization. Ugh.
It's so hard to say that word, digitization.
I'm gonna cut it. No one will know that I messed it up.
Okay.
You were talking about digitization of fossils.
Right.
Why is that important? Why do we care to do that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned in my talk, which if you would have heard if you'd been there.
Is that my poster? You know.
Yeah.
It also, I knew not going to the talk would mean you would feel even more compelled to sit down with me and talk about it on the microphone. Yeah. No, I'm strategic.
Yeah, there you go. That's very clever of you. So, the vast majority of any museum's fossil collections are not going to be on display. They're going to be down in the collections where no one almost ever gets to see them. And so people might ask the question, like, why do we care about fossils? Why do you go out and dig them up if they're just going to sit in the basement? But they are there to be used for research. They are very important for researchers to know, what was alive when. We need to be able to kind of take a survey of the past, and museums are the place where we do that most of the time. But in order to know what a museum has, you need to kind of bring the fossils out of the basement and into the light. And unfortunately, we can't just do that physically because there's not enough space. So we have to do it digitally. And that also gives the opportunity for members of the public to see them as well. Obviously, some of these are one of a kind or very fragile, and we don't want to just let people touch them. I mean, even scientists break things all the time. In fact, when I was talking to our preparator, who his job is to clean the fossils, he says, no, researchers should not touch the fossils.
I am always terrified to touch fossils. I feel like there's a preparator at University of Florida, and I think he does this with everybody, but he knows whenever I am standing in the doorway to his office looking sheepish, he's like, I'll get the glue. Let's go put back together whatever it is you screwed up.
Yeah, when I was in Mongolia for a recent research trip for this project, they just handed me the holotype of a Erlikosaurus, one of those. There's an Dinosaurs, and I'm like, are you sure you want me to touch this? I'm probably going to break it, and it's the only one of its kind. I didn't, though.
Good.
Everything's fine.
I'm glad.
But yeah, so digital obviously is easier to share and a lot harder to break. So that's the whole idea. But you can still turn it into something that you can touch and feel by printing it out. So that's kind of
You're talking about using 3D scanning.
Yep.
Okay.
And then 3D printing to make it a physical object again. And so we're trying to do that with all the fossils in our collections that are cool or interesting in some way. So we can't do every single shark tooth and every single, scrap of matrix.
Once we get to the point where we can do that, though,
it's gonna be awesome.
Every single shark tooth, digitally available for some sort of cool analyses, like meta-analyses of morphology over time. Or there's gonna be really cool science that comes out of those sorts of things once we get to that point. But you got to start here.
Yeah, we got to start the process, get it going, and we wanted to, while we were in this process, try and involve the public as much as possible. So we actually brought on 5 high school and middle school students to do the actual work of digitizing these fossils. So we trained them on how to handle the fossils and how to use the cameras, and they are the ones who actually made nearly all the digital models and all the photographs.
Wow, cool. And so you guys just were able to buy a little 3D scanner and train them how to use it, or do you use photos and then rebuild a 3D model from the photos?
Yeah, so we had a lab laser scanner, which I like to call our laser gun because it's cool. And
I think I've seen I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm like, what'd you do at work today? Oh, I shot lasers at a fossil. How cool is that? But it turns out that one is super expensive. So if you break it, all of us lose our jobs. But also, it's not as user-friendly as what we ended up deciding to do, which was photogrammetry, which is, of course, making 3D models.
And that's what I meant when I said taking
serial photos. Yeah, exactly.
Basically, you're bullet timing the fossils. No? Do you know how they did the bullet time?
I don't know how they did that, no.
So Keanu's on wires, right? So he can do that really far lean back, and the wire is holding him up at his chest so he can hold that pose. And then he's surrounded by, it almost looks like a double helix shape of cameras.
And that's how you got the shot all around.
They all go off in sequence.
Nice.
And build the image that way. That's how they shot that. And I think they were using disposable cameras or something.
What?
It was well, I guess they would have had to have been digital, but it was still surprisingly low tech.
Interesting.
It was basically you had to build the setup to get the angle of the shot you wanted as it moves around him.
Right.
And then you had to be able to digitally remove all the cameras from the shot, and then just get them to go off in quick enough sequence to pull off the bullet time effect.
Yeah, I guess that is pretty much exactly what we do.
except you don't want Keanu has to stay perfectly still instead of moving slightly.
Yeah, so we actually put our fossil on a turntable and keep the camera perfectly still and then spin the turntable around. So we only need one camera.
Julie just rewatched all of 30 Rock, and there's
yeah?
that episode where Tracy Jordan is playing Thomas Jefferson, and he builds the rotating table, and he just goes, "I shall call it Susan."
Nice. I've actually never seen 30 Rock, although everyone tells me I would really like it.
I think if you like Parks and Rec.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of a spiritual sibling.
Yeah, sibling. I'd say so. Okay, cool. Well, it's on my list. I got a long list of post-Ph.D. stuff to do. So.
Of course. Okay, so you use photogrammetry where you take a sequence of photos while the object is spinning, so you can capture all of the different angles, and then there are computer programs that are able to build that back into a three-dimensional object.
Yeah, it uses triangulation. It works exactly the same way that human eyes work to figure out how far away something is. It compares the image. Well, it needs 3 images. We can do it with just 2 because human brains are better than computers still.
And what's cool is that like this technique of photogrammetry can work as opposed to like something like a laser scanner, which kind of has limits because it has to be like plugged into the computer and
you have to have some expertise to do it. Yeah.
Right. You can do photogrammetry on huge objects. Like you can do objects that are really small. Like I imagine a lot of the fossils you're doing can fit on this tiny turntable.
Right.
But like when I was at Florissant, they were doing photogrammetry of the entire redwood stumps.
Yep.
And you basically were putting the camera on a giant selfie stick pole so you could hold it up at all the angles you needed.
Finally, a practical use for selfie sticks.
I don't think he was actually using a selfie stick.
Okay.
I think it was like a painter's pole or something like that.
Yeah.
But basically, he had an iPad app that was telling him where he needed to hold the camera for all the photos he had to take as he moved around this stump, and he was able to 3D rebuild the stump in digital space. So
yeah, it's really exciting that anybody can do this with basically any camera. So some posters this afternoon that I really want to go see. My colleagues took up trackways in New Mexico, and they brought the good camera, but the lighting conditions were just terrible, so they ended up just using their cell phones. Wow. And we made good 3D models with just grainy cell phone pictures. Wow. If you take enough of them, you can make it work. Yeah. And you can see the depth of the tracks. You can see the texture from the sandstone they're in. It's gorgeous.
Cool.
So, yeah,
that's a really cool also like citizen science story because you just need enough people to keep the project going, right? And so involving members of the public who are interested is a good way to do that.
Yeah, and all the students started out vaguely interested in science, but after they got to take part in a project where they actually collected data that's actually going to be used by scientists in the future, they were a lot more invested in science as potential career options and just thinking of themselves as scientists, which I thought was a huge practical upshot that we didn't know we were going to get when we started the project.
I was working with a summer camp, science summer camp,
nice.
This past 2 summers in West Virginia, and they want me to go prospecting for fossils with the kids, and there's a few localities they know of that have stuff, but it's kind of picked over and it's not that exciting. It's a lot of like bryozoa and brachiopod kind of stuff. Crinoids, tons of crinoids. So I got a book of fossil localities in the region and like got permission to drive the kids kind of around the area. And so, well, they had somebody driving them, but we got permission to go
with them,
far afield as compared to this year as opposed to last year. And so I told the kids, I was like, look, I just read about this location in a book. I don't know if we're going to find anything there. Like you guys are actually helping me like
find out if there's fossils there.
Yeah, like we're actually doing prospecting. Like this isn't the play area where the fossils are buried in the sandbox. And
oh my gosh, look what you found.
Right. So like I told them like we might find nothing, but we might find something really cool. And my hope was that telling them truthfully that we were doing something that I wasn't sure if it was going to work because that's how science works would get them excited. I don't know if it did or not, but
did you guys find anything cool or?
The first spot we went to was the best spot, and I went there because I thought it would be I had a feeling it was going to be the best spot, and so I knew it was like a guaranteed win, but I hoped the other spots would also have something, so they kind of lost interest after the 3rd and 4th place didn't have anything, and the 1st place had been really good. And so
yeah, it's tough if you set your expectations too high. My buddy Haviv that I mentioned, the first time he went out with us in the field, he discovered a new species of dinosaur. And so he's been trying to chase that high ever since.
Yeah.
And yet he still only found one new species, which is more than the number of dinosaurs that I've discovered.
Sure. Can people see any of the scans, the 3D models?
Yeah, so I'm glad you set that up. So I'm on Twitter at fossilfiles, files with a PH.
Am I following you on Twitter?
You better be.
I'm think I am.
But I tweet out pictures of the fossils we're working on and 3D models that we did. I make them into animated GIFs and they spin around so you can see the 3D-ness of it. Yeah, so Ryan, you should definitely follow me so you can see what we've been working on.
I'm following you now. I don't know why I wasn't following you before. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should definitely apologize for that.
I do apologize. And then, okay, and are the files, if they follow you, they'll see links and photos and stuff, but are the files going to be available for people to download and print?
Yeah, so the 2D files are currently visible and open access on our collections website at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and they're also on GBIF and IDBio and stuff like that. The 3D models are not yet available. We're still working on the database architecture for that. Our database guy is super busy. He has 3 kids, and it's going to be a while. But once it is ready, we have literally 200 models ready to go.
Awesome.
And those will be all viewable. I think we're going to restrict which ones are downloadable, kind of as a you have to like put in a request and we'll approve it, that kind of thing. Just because we don't want them showing up anywhere and people like selling them or whatever. But yeah, they'll all be viewable once we get that.
Right, because I know we have like teachers who listen.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I don't know how many of the teachers who listen also have access to 3D printers, which would be another thing that people should write in and tell me about, because that would be cool to know. Yeah. But yeah, like I feel like if a teacher, somebody with a .edu account and said like, I have a lesson plan and I need these, and
we'd be happy to provide those for that. Yeah. Some of the students who worked on the project, their teachers have 3D printers, and I actually did give them one model to try and print off just to see how well it would go. It didn't go that well because that was one of our earlier models, and their printer has some specifications where it has to be like flat on the bottom or something. So
gotcha.
Yeah, and then we were doing these like as complete 3D solids that are floating in the air or whatever. So
was there anything else that people need to know about what you're up to and what you do?
That's a fantastic question. We also like to live blog when we are out in the field. So we are expeditionlive.org for blogs we've written from the field. I've written a couple things on there, not that many, but you can definitely see pictures of us, smelly and dirty and not showered for months and digging dinosaurs. So,
nice. And then you've also been on the Jurassic Park Minute podcast,
right,
which you got me on.
Yes.
And then that's actually spawned a number of other Minute by Minute podcasts that have reached out to me wanting me to do minutes for them, which I love doing.
Oh, good.
It's a fun format.
Yeah,
it's easy. And like, Star Wars, the granddaddy of all that format, which I know you're tight with those guys too. And
yeah.
So cool, man. Well, thanks for finally doing this. Glad I was able to twist your arm into it.
It's kind of fun. I'm sorry you had to twist my arm because I really did want to. It's just our schedules and all that. So
yes. But today was the day.
Today was the day.
All right.
Cool.
All right, so thanks again to Khai for giving us some of his time. Khai's very involved in the Movies by Minute podcast genre. So if that's the kind of thing that you're also into, go check out some of his favorites like Star Wars Minute and Thing Minute and Jurassic Park Minute and all the other Minute by Minute podcasts that you may or may not have heard me guest on. He might be the reason I'm getting these guest spots, because I think he's pestering the host to have me on. So thanks for that service as well, if that's something he's doing. But now, an important part of every conference, Charlie, it's the coffee hour.
Yes, this is very important.
I don't think people know about this, but we're going to tell them maybe a little bit about it. Well, we can tell them now and then transition. What are we drinking? Most of these big conferences, they give us coffee. And as academics, this is a big deal because we need coffee to function.
Yeah, it used to be a stimulant that would help speed our thinking along, but now it's become just something that brings us to baseline.
Right, exactly. It's just getting us back to normal. And the coffee queue is fierce at these meetings. And when the coffee runs out, people are grumpy. So hopefully the coffee won't run out in our next segment. What are you drinking?
Clouds are looming and I am flying. Sun is shining. Birds are singing. Flowers are growing. Clouds are looming and I am flying. Sun is shining. Birds are singing. Flowers are growing. Clouds are looming and I am flying. Sun is shining. Birds are singing. Flowers are growing. Clouds are looming and I am flying. Sun is shining. Birds are singing. Flowers are growing. Clouds are looming and I am flying.
Wouldn't be an episode of Science Sort of if we didn't talk about what we're drinking, but because of a time difference and having some flexibility in our schedules during the day, it's a bit earlier than we would normally record. So I have a sneaking suspicion, but I'll go ahead and ask. Charlie, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking an Americano.
I am also drinking Americano.
Americano is a shot or two of espresso and then about 8 ounces of hot water. So it mimics the American cup of joe, but it's made with espresso.
Do you know why it's called a cup of joe?
Please tell. I do not know why.
GIs, so our armed forces during World War II, when they were stationed, might have been World War I, but it was one of the wars where we were fighting alongside Britain in Europe. And our soldiers, known as GI Joes, would drink coffee while the British soldiers would drink tea. And that is how coffee became known as a cup of joe. Go, Joe.
That's Great.
All right, Charlie, I need your help.
Sure.
So since I visited you and you made me an Americano in the morning,
I did.
which I think we both needed.
Yes.
I believe your exact phrase was, I'm a little touched after last night. And I don't think you meant
Yeah, and I
emotionally.
needed an Americano the next day because you generously left me half a bottle of rye whiskey.
I didn't tell you I was going to do that. I just left it in the room I stayed in, knowing you would eventually find it and be pleasantly surprised.
Indeed.
It was a good ride too. I was sad to leave it. But
Very good. But
such as our modern air travel system, where I can't always take it with me. So after that, and then because Julie and I are trying to kind of rearrange our apartment and do some improvements, we were finally able to set up the espresso machine my parents got me, and I love it, but I think I'm bad at it, so I need some help.
Yeah.
How do you make espresso?
So most machines are perfectly capable of pulling a good shot. The variables in the machine would be temperature and pressure, but a lot of that's taken care of for you at this point if you buy a modern machine. So the remaining variables.
Yeah, we got a nice Breville one. If that's, I don't know if I should be plugging brands, but
No, that's an excellent machine. That's going to be really good. So the problem with these higher end machines like that is they usually don't have training wheels on them, so to speak. So a lot of machines will have things like pressurized walls in the doser cup so that it brings the pressure of your dose of coffee up to the adequate pressure to create crema. That's like the kind of oily sweet froth on the top of an espresso shot.
Now this one came with single-walled cups and double-walled cups, and they said to use the double-walled for fresh ground.
Yeah, so
maybe it's the other way around.
Yeah, so this is similar to my machine. I have a dual boiler Breville, and so the double wall is if you don't have the ability to get the grind right. So the double wall, you can put anything in and it'll bring the pressure up to what it needs to be, and you will get some crema. The shot will generally be runnier and not quite as sweet, not as thick. So to get a true shot of espresso, you have to use the single wall, and to get the pressure high enough, you need to make the grind consistent and fine enough.
Okay, so I've been using the single wall because the machine has a grinder built in.
Oh, cool.
So I've got the fresh beans on top.
Yeah.
And then I've got the little thing where you stick what's the thing with the handle?
That's a tamper.
No, the tamper's the thing where you pound it down.
Uh-oh.
What's the part with the handle that has the cup where the espresso is that you screw into the machine?
Oh, that's the doser. No, that's the portafilter. That's the portafilter. The cup that goes in the portafilter is the doser.
Okay, so I'm talking about the portafilter with the handle and then the spout on the end.
Yeah, and you got the single wall doser inside there. Okay.
Yeah, and then I stick that under the grinder, and this machine is set up that you adjust the grind size, and then you adjust the grind amount.
Right, so the three variables: grind size, grind amount, and tamping pressure.
Right.
All three of those things will make that puck, and that puck needs to be such that the pressure is built up from the steam high enough that you can create crema. So the easiest thing to adjust is the grind fineness, because you could keep the other two variables consistent. You can keep the tamping pressure, and you don't need to tamp it that hard. You just need to make it flat. Keep the tamping pressure consistent and keep the amount of beans consistent. So I'm guessing you probably have an 18-gram doser, meaning it can hold 18 grams of ground coffee.
Well, I got two dosers. I got the single shot doser and a double shot doser. I'm yet to understand why anyone would ever do a single shot when there are two right there.
Yeah,
available.
I've never used my single shot before, because it's also
I didn't know if I was
lead
missing
to
out
a
on
weird
something.
shot because there's only holes in the middle. I don't know. I think it's something to do with frugality, but life is short. Don't do that.
I have been going through a lot more coffee beans now that this machine is set up, because it's so easy to just go and fill the doser, So I have there's a little button that clicks when you slide the doser into place that activates the grind. Mm-hmm. And if you click it once, it does a pre-measured amount based on the grind amount you've set.
Right.
And then if you click it twice and hold it, it'll do a manual, and then you just tell it when to stop. So I've been doing the predetermined amount, but it still doesn't always all go in the doser. So is it just always going to be a little bit more messy? Is that something I just have to get used to?
I guess so. Yeah, I have an independent grinder, and I have adjusted the time of that grinder so that it yields exactly 18 grams or 20 grams for my bottom portafilter.
Okay, I'll check mine. I'll get out the scale and test it and see how many grams I'm getting. And then so then I tamp it down. I love the tamper because it attaches to the machine. It's got like a little slot, a magnetic slot. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So then, I tamp it down, and I'm using the same grind size, the same grind amount, and I'm trying to tamp it consistently, but I'm still getting wildly drastic pressure fluctuations whenever I pull the actual shot.
Okay, so your shot should take about 25 to 60 seconds to pull, and it should start off as little drips from either side. I imagine it splits into two channels, right?
It does.
So it should start off as little drips that will slowly turn into what can best be described as mouse tails, because they bend towards the center of the portafilter because of the water tension. What is that? Hydrostatic tension. And so you get these nice little mouse tails. That's indicative of a good shot. If it pulses or has big rat tails, your grind is too coarse. And if it only drips or nothing comes out, then your grind is too fine. So you have to burn through some beans until you get the grind dialed in. Another very challenging variable is that this is going to change each time you change your type of coffee bean.
Oh, really?
Darker roasts are oily, and so you need to grind them more coarsely because the permeability that allows the steam to flow through it is going to be reduced by that oil. Lighter roasts and medium roasts, you need to grind more finely because they don't have that oil, and so they're naturally more permeable. So you need to make it more fine to reduce the pore space in your doser cup.
Interesting. And then the great irony for me has always been that espresso roasts, if you get like a coffee that's labeled espresso roast, that tends to be a darker roast, and darker roasts have less caffeine. So again, why are you going through the trouble of making espresso with something that doesn't have as much caffeine as possible?
That's old world espresso. So that's what like Italy and France prefers. But you can call anything espresso. Espresso is just treating the ground coffee with steam rather than water.
But can you call anything espresso?
If you're from Texas, yeah, that's fine. Otherwise, you need to get slapped.
I did send you that photo when I saw it on a menu one time with an X.
Yeah.
It happens.
So yeah, I prefer medium roasts because they usually have much more interesting flavor profiles. You get a lot of like tropical fruits and honey, and even some acidity, some bright notes happening there. Whereas the dark roasts are usually like caramely and chocolatey and nutty, which isn't bad either, but I kind of want that brightness to give me a little extra high.
I agree. I find the aroma just much more pleasing too.
Yeah.
So I feel like I know a fair bit about coffee, and I'm very good at making a good cup of coffee in my pour over, or even with a French press. Because a lot of people don't do French press right. But yeah, this espresso world is a whole new world. So I needed some help. So I appreciate the beta. Yeah,
you just spend an hour with it, play with the grinds until you get the little drips, and then mouse tails, and it should take somewhere between 25 and 60 seconds to pull, depending on whether or not you want a ristretto or a long shot.
And mine actually has the pressure gauge, so I'm actually watching the pressure gauge as I'm pulling the shot. So.
Good. Yeah, that will definitely be a helpful aid, because that'll tell you if you're way too fine or way too coarse. Because if you're too coarse, you won't got pressure, and if you're too fine, you'll have too much pressure and nothing will come out.
And then Julie set me up a whole little coffee corner, so I've got my little electric kettle right there, and so I usually start the electric kettle as I start grinding the beans, and then I've got the hot water ready to go for my Americano. Yeah, that's great. I never order them when I'm out, but I'm enjoying making them at home.
I love things that require like a method and some time just to put into it to give you something to enjoy. It slows your fast-paced day down for the few minutes you're working on that. And I think people had the opportunity to do that a lot more often in the past because things weren't nearly as automatic. And people would smoke pipes and things like that, and they would you picture Gandalf or something. So you naturally would have all these breaks to pause and contemplate and think.
And like whittling,
and we don't have that
whittle anymore, do they?
Yeah, whittling. We don't have that anymore. Even if you have a moment of time, you're on your phone, and pulling a good shot of espresso requires you to not look at your phone for a few minutes.
It's almost like that even as godless atheists, we appreciate some sort of ritual.
Yes, indeed.
I think that is kind of what it comes down to. Your ritual can be yoga, meditation, prayer, anything, but ours is making coffee.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So I'm drinking Stumptown's Hairbender, which is a light to medium roast. It's kind of their standard espresso pull out of Portland. And yeah, it's citrusy, honey, that kind of thing going on. But it's getting a little old. It's kind of cold now. But I had an espresso when I woke up from that, and then I made myself an Americano to go, so I'd have something to drink during the day.
Nice. I am drinking Abe, our friend Abe. One of the reasons he hasn't been on the show is because he got a new gig helping promote a coffee company. He's got an even newer gig coming up, but I'll let him announce that when he's ready to announce that. But he sent me a coupon for it, so I was able to get it some beans for free. It's Kickin' Horse Coffee. I was able to find it at my local Safeway, and I got their Smartass blend, which is a whole bean African, Central, and South American blend.
Very good. Yeah, I like that that type of coffee. I pick that up every once in a while too.
Nice. Well, Abe's working for him.
Very cool.
But back to getting back to work. I was working the microphone to get interviews at GSA, and a lot of times when I'm at these meetings, I'll just send out a tweet that's kind of like, hey, I'm on the floor doing interviews. GSA was actually really nice. They set me up with a room to do the interviews in. So I would tweet, if you want to be interviewed, let me know. And sometimes people would actually respond. And then I'd be like, okay, come meet me in this room and I'll interview you. And this was one of those interviews. It's another listener to the show, Allison Jones. She was finishing up some research looking at petrofabrics.
What?
Do you know what a petrofabric is?
Petro means rock. Mm-hmm. Fabric means like a weave of some sort, right?
Yep. So essentially looking at the grain patterning and structure in Jurassic granitites.
And what will that tell us about something?
Well, I'll let you listen to the interview and find out.
Cool.
Wake up every morning is the same. The coffee and the paper and the thoughts inside your brain. Nothing's changed. You don't understand how it went so fast. The money you made and the love you thought would last. It all went past. I want something new. I want something new. I want something new. I want something true. Something I do on my own. I need something fun. I need something fun. I need something fun to distract my mind. Get me off of this grindstone.
So, I am being joined as I type in my password and bring up the abstract book. Not that I don't know your name, but
That's okay.
I am being joined by Allison Jones of the University of Wisconsin. And you are here to talk about petrofabrics, and I don't even know what that means. So we're going to have to do one of those things where you walk us through the title of your abstract before we even talk about what the science is. So
Sure.
Your title is Analysis of Petrofabrics in the Jurassic Tuttle Lake Formation near Grass Lake, Mount Talek Roof Pendant, El Dorado County, California.
That's right. It's a long one.
Yeah, so walk us through it. Tell us what it is you are here to present.
Sure. So the analysis of petrofabrics part, that's essentially saying that we're interested in the 3D fabric of what we have deemed a metaconglomerate rock in this region of California and the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Okay, that's where El Dorado County is.
Yeah.
Gold County, I guess, or the Gold Road.
Yeah. It's up there. And we're kind of interested in how these rocks have been kind of mashed up and squished and see if there are any patterns to this and what that can tell us about the history of the Sierra Nevada, especially prior to when the granites of the Sierra Nevada intruded.
And the granites of the Sierra Nevada is intruded in the Cretaceous?
Jurassic Cretaceous.
Jurassic Cretaceous, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. And essentially, if I remember my own geology courses as an undergrad, it was the Sierra Nevadas were just this giant pluton, this giant piece of underground rock that got pushed up into a mountain range and then kind of eroded down into a mountain shape.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so wild. I can't even imagine what that would have looked like. I mean, I know it's not happening on human timescales, but just the idea that things like that do happen at all is just wild to me.
Yeah, my professors always kind of equate it to a lava lamp and kind of picturing these magma bodies. They're less dense than the surrounding rock, so they kind of travel upward and then occasionally stall out, and you get those granites that don't necessarily erupt as volcanoes at the surface.
And then those form like bedrock or whatever.
Yeah, those kind of make up the picturesque Yosemite Valley type granites that you see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, Yosemite Valley was glacially carved, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's what exposed it.
U shape.
Mm-hmm.
Neat.
Yep.
Okay, so the first sentence of your abstract, you refer to something called an RF-Phi analysis.
Yeah, RFV.
Phi?
Yeah, it's kind of a mathematical, some special magic that
Yeah, tell us about it.
People other than myself really know the details of, but we use a software program to analyze the kind of these geometric shapes that the rocks create. So
and those shapes are created by like the pulling and the stretching of the metamorphosis?
That's absolutely right. So our method basically involves going out to this area and looking at the conglomerate, taking sheets of plastic, because we can't take these rocks home. We take these sheets of plastic and we trace out the class within the conglomerate.
It's kind of low tech.
It seems low tech, yes, but it gets better.
Okay, yeah, keep going.
So we trace out these class, and we need at least 3 faces that are near orthogonal to each other.
That just means like 90 degrees?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. So we're trying to we want to get a 3-dimensional mean of what these shapes are. So we get these 3 orthogonal faces, we trace out the class, and then we take that plastic back to the lab and we photograph it. We actually put it up on a wall, we photograph it, and then we digitize those class in a program called EllipseFit.
Okay.
And that was designed by Frederick Vollmer at SUNY Geneseo. SUNY New Paltz.
And so wait, just to take a step back, when you say class, since we don't talk about a ton of geology on this show all the time, so when we think of, when geologists talk about rocks, most people I think of rocks as these fairly standard, not really that interesting objects that are surrounding us all the time. But what rocks really are some sort of matrix with stuff in that matrix. And so like the matrix might be limestone, and then you've got like a bunch of fossils in that limestone, and you've got a bunch of like calcium crystals in that actual like nodules of calcium or phosphate or something like that. So when we talk about rocks, we're talking about some sort of matrix. And then within that matrix, if there's like distinct minerals or other rocks or stones that are like embedded in that, those are the class, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a meta conglomerate. So you can imagine that it's a rock made up of other rocks that's also been metamorphosed. So it's a little heated up and it's got this nice green tint to it. So it's like a classic meta conglomerate.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we're looking at the shapes of those rocks within the rock.
And the shapes tell you about the history, what that rock's been through.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So we traced out those class, we throw it into this program, and what it does is create a mean ellipsoid shape and tells us whether that shape has been pulled and stretched or if it's been flattened out. And what the orientation in space of these ellipsoids, which is really interesting. So you can kind of see what direction those stresses are coming, those prior stresses were coming from, right? That created these strange shapes. So we kind of expected that the shapes would have something to do with the granites around this conglomerate, but it turns out, we really don't think it does. So there are 2 plutons surrounding, and a pluton is
that underground rock.
Right, it's those magma bodies that stalled out in the crust.
Yeah, so it starts off as magma as it's moving up through the crust, and then when it stalls out, it cools into a rock. And once it's cooled, we call it a pluton?
We call it a pluton.
Yeah, and that comes from like Pluto, like the god of the underworld.
I suppose so.
Yeah. Pretty sure it does.
I've never really thought about it.
Yeah, Pluto was also the god of like minerals and gems and stuff because he lived underground.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's also why if you live in a society that's ruled by the wealthy, it's a plutocracy.
Wow, I just learned so much.
Word nerd.
So we thought these plutons probably would have an effect on the strain on this conglomerate. Well, we're not sure that it does, and it turns out they might actually be depositional fabrics. So fabrics in the rocks that were created when the rock was deposited.
Huh, okay.
So these rocks are also a little bit volcaniclastic, And prior work says that they were deposited off the side of volcanoes during the Jurassic. And that's really interesting. So you can imagine that there are these volcanoes out in the Pacific Ocean.
Well, yeah, that's a good point to mention, is that we're talking about a time when California was mostly underwater.
Pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, okay. 'Cause, people sometimes ask, like, what are dinosaur fossils from California like? And I'm
Well,
like,
we don't have
really
any.
aren't any, because you get the occasional thing that sank. But other than that, it's not really a place to find good dinosaur fossils.
Totally. So we have these volcanoes where the coast of California is in modern day, and there is ocean water in between them. So there's sediment being shed off the side of these volcanoes as they're erupting into these basins, and that's where we got this formation in the first place.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in your field work, you essentially just go out into the mountains with a bunch of sheets of plastic, and like, how does it actually work to do the field work?
Essentially, yes. We actually have to backpack to this remote area.
That's pretty cool.
It's in a place called Desolation Wilderness. So it's actually a pretty popular backpacking area.
So do you get like backpackers coming up to you being like, what on
They're
earth
like,
are you
what
guys
the
doing?
heck are you doing?
Yeah.
Actually, no, we don't really see people when we're out there. We try to go in the middle of the week so we don't have to deal with a whole lot of other traffic. But yeah, we'll see the occasional person or two, and they're like, what are you doing with this plastic and these Sharpies?
So it probably looks like you're trying to hide a body or something.
It probably does. Yeah, so we literally bring out plastic and Sharpies. Thank you.
Phone drop.
And we bring out our Brunton compasses, of course, because
You have to have a Brunton.
Yeah, you can't be a geologist without a Brunton. And we go out there and we just, we do our work and we hike back out at the end of the week, and it's a good time and we do a lot of science.
And so this is pretty like pure geology, right?
Yes.
You're not like this doesn't have like applications for finding gold deposits or anything.
No.
Yeah, so you're truly trying to understand the history of the landscape and the history of the rocks.
Yep.
And then just piece that history together into a story.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And it's part of a bigger story too. This is a small part on a larger project. There are folks working on the geochemistry of this rock. There are people who are working on just different aspects of it, and eventually it'll morph into hopefully a publication.
Now, I'm not sure if we said it at the beginning, but
Yeah.
the Sierra Nevadas are granite. These are granites too, or are they granodiorite or something that's been metamorphed?
Yeah, for simplicity's sake, yeah, they're some shade of granite.
That's been squished or stretched.
So the Jurassic Tuttle Lake conglomerate, it's
It is a metaconglomerate. You said that earlier.
Yeah,
metaconglomerate is the type of rock that it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the plutons themselves are some sort
Surrounding
of granite,
area. Yeah, that's the main rock you see when you're in the Tahoe, Sierra Nevada area, that really kind of iconic, like you said, the iconic Yosemite Valley rock.
That's right.
Which have you seen?
What?
There's these you can look up 1-star reviews of national parks.
I've seen those.
And there's one for Yosemite that's like, all the rock was very gray, not very inspiring. 1 star.
Clearly not a geologist. That's terrible.
It is terrible.
Well, the interesting thing about this conglomerate we work on is there are very few of these rocks left in the Sierra Nevada. They basically got all obliterated when there was erosion, and then when the granites came in.
So they're not as tough as the surrounding granites.
Exactly. And we call these roof pennants.
Okay.
They're just like these little tiny bits of pre-existing rock that are still up there.
Cool.
Yeah.
And they're easily accessible on the surface, or do you have to like climb or hike, or what's
This one's pretty easily accessible. Yeah. They're just out in the middle of nowhere.
Nice. And then what's the future look like now that you've got some data back and you're presenting the data as a poster later this afternoon? And I said, hey, we can practice your spiel, and so we can practice what kinds of questions people get asked at a poster session. Since I'm not allowed to record in the poster sessions, we have to fake it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not getting the real thing right now.
Exactly. But what comes next? What's kind of the future of this project look like for you? Or are you moving on to other things?
Well, I recently started. Well, this project was done at University of the Pacific, which is where I did my undergrad. And I just finished up there and started at University of Wisconsin in Madison. So I am starting all sorts of new research, but I hope to still be involved in this project. I do have an undergrad co-author. Her name's Tori Arnold, and she's taking on this project. She's a junior this year, so she's just getting started. And we're kind of hoping to do more statistical analyses to see if these fabrics are statistically significant, basically, and if they are unexpected, in a sense.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a friend who's going to help us out with that. And like I said, it's part of a larger project, so I'm sure there are other aspects of it that we're going to investigate. I forgot to mention another girl who's here at the conference, Lauren Herbert. She did a paleomagnetic sampling of some of the, we have some other igneous intrusions in the area, and she wanted to figure out the ages of these intrusions. So she did that aspect of the project, and that was kind of interesting.
Totally.
So yeah, it's going in all sorts of directions.
So you got like geochemistry, paleomag, your type of analysis, which is...
Yeah, some structural analysis.
So you call it structural analysis
Sure.
or petrofabric analysis. And it sounds like a pretty active area for this weird desolation spot out in the Sierras.
Yeah, it's awesome. Even if you don't like geology, you should just go
Hike
backpacking.
around. Yeah, and look at
it's
some
great.
rocks. Take a hand lens and a Brunton, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
I remember we had to go do a project in the Sierra Nevadas when I was an undergrad where we hit drop stones, glacial drop stones, or we hit big boulders to see if they were glacial drop stones. Because I guess they have a different sound.
If they are no, they're not.
Well, I think it's if they've been frozen and like water, it's in the cracks and everything.
Yeah,
then
they have a different
sound. They have like a different sound when you clang them.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was the extent of my Sierra Nevada geology experience.
That's cool. You should go back.
I should. It's a little hard to get to from DC, but worth.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I forgot you're in
trek.
DC now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when I'm back in the Bay Area, it's usually to see family, so not a lot of Sierra Nevada adventures in my future.
That's a shame.
Have you figured out what you're going to do for your master's project yet? Or?
A little bit. We're still kind of developing the program or the project. Excuse me. I just started, so my first semester is really course heavy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I'm going to be working on some faults, actually really close to the University of Wisconsin, in the Baraboo quartzite, which is a pretty well-studied quartzite. Wisconsin isn't well known for its geology, but that's one of the most visited places there.
I don't think people
geology.
think Wisconsin and think like faulting either.
No, they don't. They're very small faults. It's not like San Andreas style faulting.
But that's another thing that people don't understand about the world we live in is that there are fault lines everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't notice them most of the time because they're not impacting civilization.
Exactly. Yeah. And these faults, there's actually a lot of evidence for something called a slow slip event, which aren't earthquakes necessarily. So
more of a gentle grinding.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're kind of looking at the rock record and seeing if slow slip events are recognizable in the rock record there in Baraboo.
And is it that similar sort of strain analysis that you've done previously, or new type of analysis?
It's totally different, which is cool because the strain analysis I worked on in the Sierras was involving some ductile deformation, and that's kind of like soft, warm rock squishing,
right?
As opposed to faulting, which is brittle deformation. The rock is hard and cold, and it's breaking.
So kind of squishy versus cracking.
Exactly. So
gotcha.
I'm kind of spreading my wings and investigating some different types of structural geology. So it's a lot of fun.
And you're on Twitter.
I am.
Do you want people to follow you on Twitter? Do you tweet about rocks and your work?
No, I don't. Well, I don't, and I should. I really should be on the Twitter game, but I'm not yet.
Abe follows you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
From the show.
That's awesome.
Vulcan Abe. Well, we can plug your Twitter handle if you want. If you would
go
rather.
for it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
you are at Allison_Jones1.
Wow, that's clever.
You can always change it.
I should.
I think once people follow you, you can change it and they'll still be following you.
Cool.
Yeah, so maybe we will start seeing some updates on your work as maybe some people who listen to the show start following you. And is there anything else you want people to know about the work you're doing or your life as a geoscientist?
No, not necessarily. I'm just, like I said, getting started as a master's student, so that's all fun and exciting. Hopefully going to pursue a Ph.D. eventually, so
awesome.
I'll be in the academic sphere for a while, I think.
Keep us posted.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you so much for giving me some of your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So that was the first round of interviews I did. I tried to keep the interviews, 15 to 20, sometimes 25 to 30 minutes, so that we could string a couple of them together to have a show. So we're actually going to come back next week with part 2. But to wrap up this week's show, we're going to need to do what we always do, and that's a PaleoPOW. So even though both of the people interviewed today were listeners to the show, we also have to do our normal listener feedback. And so that's coming up next.
Taking the feeling coming out from the ground, but that's just something I do sometimes. And then I just come out the door, taking the wind coming off of the shore. on the Black Rock is where I like to go after a long night coming home from the show. And that's where I write my song all day long, the Black
All right, it is now time for the PaleoPOW, the segment of the show where we do listener feedback, and we are going to begin. Oh, this is tough. Okay, so we normally begin with a patron thanks and a thesis title because we want to start off by thanking the people that are making the show possible with their money. And then, you know, if we have something kind of negative, we'll bracket it, and so then we can end on something positive. But I think we're gonna have to flip it today, and the person we're doing a patron thesis for will definitely understand. So we're actually going to start with a somewhat sticky wicket on climate change. Charlie?
All right. Yeah. So we got an email from Kris, and he writes, I'm not a climate change denier by any means, but there are a group of people that have interesting things to say about the predictions made by current climate models. I don't know enough about the science to make any kind of determination about what they say. Is it possible for you guys to cover it? I love your show and would really like to hear what you have to say. Here are some examples of what I'm talking about. And so he links to, I assumed his gender, I may be wrong. He links to 4 different articles. The first 2 are podcasts from the podcast Econ Talk, and one is an individual named Matt Ridley. The second is an individual named Judith Curry. And then the third link is to What's Up With That, and that is Anthony Watt's climate skeptic blog. And then there's a link to zerohedge.com, which is an anonymous news aggregator that's mainly used to just push the sale of gold. And that links to a climate study done by Jennifer Murahasi. So there's four different individuals linked via these links that Kris posted in his email. Concludes with basically most of what I've heard from these people is that anthropogenic climate change is real, but the models we use to make predictions are either based on guesses or aren't being borne out as we look at results. Is there any truth to these claims? Okay, so there's 2 questions. Is it possible for you guys to cover it? Yes. Is there any truth to these claims? No. Should we dig into it or are we done?
Let's dig a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think we do need to talk a little bit about models and uncertainties and how assumptions are built into models and why that doesn't make the model wrong.
Yeah, let's start with what we know about climate science, the things that for which there is no debate whatsoever. So greenhouse gases, these are gases that they're transparent to visible light, so sunlight can go through them on their way through the atmosphere, but then they absorb and re-radiate infrared light. So once the sunlight strikes the surface of the Earth, it heats up the surface of the Earth and is re-radiated as infrared. As that infrared light shines back into space from the surface, it is absorbed and re-radiated by these so-called greenhouse gases.
And that's like fundamental to their physical structure as chemicals. Like this is fundamental physics. This isn't based on a model or anything.
Yeah, anybody can test this by sitting in a car with the windows rolled up on a sunny day, and it will be hotter in your car than it is outside. So greenhouse gases include CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, NO2, among many, many others.
H2O.
Yeah. So that's step 1. Step 2, the concentration of these gases have risen quite significantly during the last 200 years. There's no debate on this either. We can measure how much the concentration of these gases in the atmosphere.
Right, and we can measure the concentration of these gases in the atmosphere, even in the past before we had the ability to measure those gases, because things like glaciers, which were melting, by the way, have pockets of air in them. Not huge pockets, but tiny little bubbles. There's a book called 2 Mile Time Machine about this exact sort of thing. And those bubbles represent the atmosphere, at least in the Arctic at that time. So you can analyze the carbon dioxide amount in parts per million in those bubbles, and you can get a measure of what the atmospheric composition was at that time.
Indeed. All right. So step 3 is human activities, things like energy use, clearing forests, etc., are the largest contributor to the rise of these greenhouse gases. There's no debate on this either. We can even look at the isotopic nature of these gases and tie them directly to fossil fuels because they're enriched in lighter carbon.
Right. So the carbon ratio tells us, again, based on fundamental physics, tells us that the carbon atoms forming the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere right now are coming because we burnt fossil fuels. Like that's not up for debate.
All right.
Am I being too harsh?
No. This is good. So we know that we're emitting these gases. We know that these gases increase the heat absorption in the atmosphere and the ocean too. Incidentally, this is a thing that climate deniers fail to realize. Over 99% of the heat goes into the ocean, not the atmosphere. And that's because the ocean is much bigger than the atmosphere, and the ocean has a much higher heat capacity than the atmosphere. You know, it takes a lot more energy to heat water up than it does to heat air up. You guys all know this from living on this planet.
Yeah, and cooking food for yourself, presumably sometimes.
Yeah.
It's also the reason why sticking your hand in a 212-degree oven doesn't burn you the same way sticking your hand in 212-degree water does, or 100 degrees Celsius for literally most of everyone else on the planet.
So we've established 4 things that are all incredibly well-known, easily tested, no debate whatsoever. So scientists start to develop these models, computer models, modeling the fundamental physics of the atmosphere and the ocean and terrestrial systems to study the climate and predict how changing the concentration of these gases may change the temperature of the atmosphere and the ocean. These are large computer models. They're very sophisticated. Basic models have easily been verified. They can track the climate and predict it accurately in the past.
Which is a great way to test your model, right? You don't have to always just be testing it based on a future that is unknown, but parts of which can be predicted. You can also run the machine backwards to make sure that it's giving you the right outputs based on what we do know about past climate.
And these models are continuing to grow in sophistication every year. There's several of them at this point. There are scientific conferences where these climate modelers present their work all the time. So why are they still doing this if this is all so well known? It's because the debate lies within the subgrid mechanisms, the feedback loops, small quantum effects in the atmosphere, lesser known things like the behavior of different particles in the atmosphere, land use change, glaciation changes. So all these nonlinear subgrid feedback effects, this is where the science is at this point. There's no debate on the general trend that we are emitting greenhouse gases and it's causing the Earth to warm. And just because there is a debate on these subgrid mechanisms does not discount the veracity of the models in any way.
And the models, I think another thing people maybe don't realize about these models is these models aren't just saying one thing. Like they're not just giving a single output answer for what climate will be 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They're giving a range of possible outcomes based on the parameters put into them. Like there's uncertainty built into them in both the inputs and the outputs in a way where we can bracket our expectations into a reasonable framework that we can then try to work with and develop policy around, right?
Right. Okay.
I want to give an example of one of the active areas of uncertainty and research that's being done, just to show like how kind of petty's the wrong word, but like how it's not even minor. I don't want to use the word minor, but like how finicky is probably the best word.
Yeah.
It can be. Clouds are really tough to model.
They're all different colors, all different.
They're dynamic. Yeah, they're changing constantly. They're ephemeral. Certain types of clouds actually help cool Earth surface temperature, and other types of clouds increase the warming effect. So like they're not even all doing the same thing. And then if you think about the fact that like meteorologists who have very good tools at their disposals can barely tell you if it's going to be cloudy 10 days from now. And then we also don't necessarily know exactly how cloud systems will respond as the climate changes. So you're modeling a thing that you're already have difficulty modeling because it's a chaotic system, and then you're trying to predict how a chaotic system is going to respond to these feedbacks as you move the model forward. So that's where a lot of this uncertainty, and that's where a lot of the debate amongst scientists is happening, because we want to get it right, not because we want to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Like it's all the process of refinement is to better understand the problem we all agree is happening.
Right. And so I want to dig into these 4 links a little bit, but Ryan just brought up an excellent point that alludes to some of the many fallacies, logical fallacies that the climate deniers employ. And so the fallacy he was just alluding to was the fallacy of composition. And that means just because a piece of something is fallacious or not a legitimate argument does not mean that the entire whole is fallacious or not a legitimate argument. So just because there's a small piece of a climate model that's up to debate does not mean that the entire parcel and package of all climate models ever written in the history of science are wrong as well.
Yeah, science is built, unlike a house of cards, science is built on a pretty robust foundation, and which is why it takes such a monumental discovery or reanalysis to overturn a commonly held scientific principle.
So the first 2 links were on Econ Talk. I did not take the time to listen to these podcasts, and I'll explain why I did not take the time when I wrap up this PaleoPOW. But the first individual was Matt Ridley. He is a well-known climate denier. These climate deniers are so well-known that scientists have begun to classify them in different camps, and he is known as a lukewarmer or a stage 3 climate denier. Stage 1 states that climate change isn't happening. Stage 2 states that climate change is happening, but it's not our fault. A stage 3 climate denier says climate change is happening. It is our fault, but it does not matter. Bjorn Lundberg would fit into that stage as well.
I've never heard of these. This is fascinating. This is great.
The second podcast links has Judith Curry as a guest. She is a stage 2 climate denier. She believes global warming is happening, but she does not feel humans are responsible. She currently is a member of the IPA. That's not the beer we love. It's the, what is the IPA again? It's something in Australia. It's the Australian equivalent of the Heartland Institute, which is a climate denying institute here in America. It's like the Independent Policy Assembly or something in Australia, Institute for Policy Analysis or something like that. Something very benignly named, but it really is simply focused on promoting mining and fossil fuel industries. So that's Judith Curry, stage 2 denier, believes global warming is happening, but does not believe it's our fault. The third link is What's Up. With that, it's a well-known climate skeptic blog by Anthony Watts. He is a weather presenter. He's not an atmospheric scientist, nor is he a climate scientist. He merely presents the weather. And he focuses a lot on micro temperature measurements, regional temperature measurements. And he's one of those individuals that gets really excited when things are colder than they're normal, than they should be or something. So he looks at variations in the signal of temperature data, but does not really follow the trends. And he selectively tries to find periods of cooling. That's Anthony Watts. The fourth link is Jen Marohasi, and she actually recently published a paper in GeoResJ, and the paper looks at GeoResJ is a small Elsevier journal that's now no longer in circulation, no longer publishing. But she wrote a paper that says big data finds the medieval warm period. So there's no denial here. She's looking at this period. She uses neural networks, so artificial intelligence, to analyze big data, proxy data for climate in the medieval period, and identifies this period of warmness that was present in Europe during the medieval period. And she says, therefore, current climate deviations, temperature anomalies in present day are in the noise because we've had these deviations in the past.
Medieval warm period was when they were like growing wine grapes in Britain. Stuff. It was
right.
A real thing that happened, right?
Yeah, real thing that happened. We'll get to that in a second. So she's a stage 2 denier. So she believes global warming is real, does not believe it's human caused. The medieval warm period was a real thing. There's numerous written documents, historical documents, and proxy data that shows that it did happen, and it did happen in Europe. It is not a representation of the Earth's average temperature as a whole. And so this is a confusion of regional temperature data with global average data.
And like the Earth, we tend to think of the Earth as a stable place. We actually talk about this on an upcoming episode with a couple of other Earth scientists. We tend to think of the Earth as this really stable place because, and this is a fallacy that's been, maybe not a fallacy, this is a mindset that is being thought about more and more with all other aspects of human life, is that basically whatever you are raised in, you assume is just the normal baseline that all things should be.
That's a total fallacy. It's a fallacy of stasis. Because something is the way it is, that means it's always been that way and always will be that way.
And that's just the way, like, all humans are susceptible to that. Charlie and I are susceptible to that. We're not claiming that we're better than that. But part of learning to think like a geologist, and this is training that Charlie and I have both had in a formal way, part of learning to think like a geologist is I think there's two big fundamental lessons. One, to think like a geologist, you have to be able to conceptualize deep time. And two, you have to conceptualize the Earth as a dynamic system. 3, optional, it really helps if you're good at 3D spatial reasoning.
Yeah, I agree with those points.
But if you just avoid structure classes, then you can get around that slightly. So Earth's really dynamic. So like something when there are climate shifts that aren't caused by humans. So things like, gigantic volcanic eruptions or asteroids a couple miles across hitting us can cause really dramatic climate changes. That's something I think that it's hard for the human brain to process Earth as this thing that is constantly writhing and changing around us.
So I'd like to read the first 2 paragraphs from the Zero Hedge link that Kris sent. Begins with, "It's not so surprising that so many people believe the idea that global warming is being caused almost entirely by human activity, given the fact that most scientists seem to believe the same thing. But scientists should probably ask themselves why there's still such a large cohort of deniers, as they like to call them, who are adamant that anthropogenic climate change is a scam. The reason why is that scientific community has been caught so many times tampering with climate data and making outlandish claims. The celebrities and politicians who promote this cause have also been caught on many occasions, living in palatial mansions, flying across the world in private jets, and generally just living lives of excess that produce so much more carbon than the average person. Given these facts, how could anyone take the global warming argument seriously?" So there were many fallacies in those first 2 paragraphs.
And there's some things that were claimed as facts that aren't facts.
Yeah, fallacy of composition. Just because a handful of scientists have tampered with the data does not mean that all scientists have tampered with the data. It wasn't like tampering in the sense of a lie. It was an embellishment. It was like the old man telling a story for the 100th time, and it gets a little better each time. It's not good science, and these people have left the scientific community because of it, but it's not it's a grandpa lie. It's not like a denial of truth. Second fallacy was the fallacy of hypocrisy. Just because someone is behaving counter to their argument does not mean that their argument is invalid. Just because Al Gore has a jet does not mean that his argument about global warming is false just because he's emitting carbon.
He's also got like Secret Service protection that he has to deal with. So there's unfortunately, the guy's always going to have to deal with a few extra vehicles going around him for the rest of his life. That's just a fact of being at that high level of a politician.
Right. Yeah, given these facts, how could anyone take global warming arguments seriously? It's just an absurd way to begin a topic. And also the idea of a large cohort of deniers, and it's not a large cohort. It's something like 97% of scientists don't believe in global warming. They subscribe to global warming using the scientific method. And I'd like to close with that if I can.
You may. I have less problems with using the word believe because, much like the word theory, when we say we believe something, we mean we're accepting it on the basis of overwhelming evidence.
Right.
Lots of people believe things that have way less evidence than climate change. So I don't know why we're quibbling over that.
Yeah. Do we really want to start a conversation about belief?
Yeah. And then the 3% of quote unquote scientists that don't accept climate change are not climate scientists usually. Like if you only look at people who study Earth and Earth climate, the number is even higher. It's the 3% tend to be people like engineers, mathematicians, theoretical physicists. Those kinds of fields have a higher proportion of climate change deniers than other fields of science. The reasons why that bias might exist are interesting and sociological and probably a topic of discussion for another time. But yeah, the 97% is even more founded in reality and the way scientists really think than even the 97% connotes. And how do you find a group this big where you can get 97% to agree on anything?
And then I have to continue with the Zero Hedge article a little bit because this is referring to Jennifer Marhouse's article. And Then the next paragraph begins with another fallacy. It's a fallacy of authority. It says, Jennifer Marahasi, a scientist with a rather long list of impressive credentials, with a hyperlink. So I clicked that hyperlink. I was like, well, what are these impressive credentials? She was a senior research fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, Australia's Heartland Institute, IPA. She used to be a professor at Central Queensland University, but then was terminated because her work, quote, in her own words, was not well integrated into emerging research clusters. I don't know what that means. I think it means your science was shit and we fired you.
Or it means you were telling everyone else in the department that climate change wasn't a thing and they didn't want their department associated with that, which, I mean, there's lots of problems in the way academia, with the hiring processes and the firing processes and the tenure process. Like, there's plenty of problems.
Oh, yeah, it's a human affair, and humans are irrational, unnoble agents.
Which is why we try to model things instead of just relying on our gut instinct. Yeah. Like science, if anything, is removing humanity from our observations about the universe as much as possible.
There's an awesome YouTube lecture on the scientific method by Richard Feynman, and he states 3 things. This is how science works. Number 1, you make a guess. Number 2, you compute the consequences of the guess using something like a model or going out to look for evidence. Then number 3, you compare your computations to reality, to nature. If it doesn't match, then you're wrong, and you have to make a new guess. And so what are we doing with climate science? We're making all these guesses about how the Earth's atmosphere and oceans are going to respond to increasing greenhouse gas levels put into the atmosphere by humans. We're making all sorts of guesses, and our guesses have gotten incredibly sophisticated such that they have to use massive supercomputers spreading across the entire globe to make these guesses and to compute the consequences of these guesses. The level of sophistication brought up by the climate deniers is frustrating at best. And the reason I didn't listen to those first 2 podcasts is because bad guesses are a waste of time. They are just simply a waste of time. And Richard Feynman discusses this at the end of the lecture. He uses an analogy of trying to crack a safe that you find in the basement of a house that you recently moved into.
Which for him might not have even been an analogy because the man was a safe cracker. He could have actually done that with his hands.
Yeah. So you find this new safe, and you're trying to figure out the combination. You've been working at it for a few days, and you've been down in your basement, laying on your side, writing notes with a stethoscope, trying to figure out the combination of this safe. Meanwhile, your brother comes over, and he's been drinking, and he's like, have you tried 10-22-86? That's a guess, right? That's step 1 of the scientific method. But it's so frustrating of a guess to practice scientist, the person who's been trying to crack the safe, because you already know that the first number is 16, for example. You know that it's a 5-digit safe, not a 3-digit safe. And you know that the highest number is 64. So this guess of 22-something-87 is wrong in 3 different ways. Wrong first number, only 3 digits, and a number beyond 64. And so it's a waste of time to even explain how stupid that guess was. And that's how these climate deniers come across to practice climate scientists. It's just like, can you please off and stop wasting our time with these incredibly stupid guesses? One of the most recent stupid guesses I've seen is that, look, it's getting colder in Greenland. Of course it's getting colder. The thermal hailing circulation is shutting down because cold fresh water is pouring off of Greenland's ice sheet. That's why it's colder there. That's part of climate.
Yeah, warm water from the equatorial Atlantic isn't being transported north to Greenland as quickly as it used to be.
And like, you played yourself. You just further proved global warming. You proved one of the
Charlie
the
goes
results
DJ Khaled on us. Congratulations, you played yourself.
Okay, I'm done. Mic drop.
Okay, I'll end on one final fallacy, since we've talked a lot about fallacies, and that's the fallacy of perfection. So there's another argument that climate skeptics and deniers will employ where they say, well, your models aren't perfect. A, we already know they're perfect. We're saying they're not perfect. But then they'll say, well, if it's not perfect, then how can we trust it? And that's the fallacy of perfection. Something doesn't have to be perfect to still work better than what you're suggesting.
Indeed.
Yeah. So it's don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Good, both in terms of a good enough model and the good effort of scientists trying to help prevent the world from some really bad stuff.
But thank you so much, Kris, for this email. Hopefully you're a little bit more informed, and hopefully we've given you some resources to further inform yourself, because this thing isn't going away. There's so much money and so much politics involved in climate change and the emissions of CO2 that this is the fight of this century, and it's going to be incredibly interesting. I have no doubt that humans can figure this out. I hope we choose to do so.
And I hope it speaks to our attitude on this show that people who have questions where they know we're going to disagree with them still ask us, because they hope, or at least can have some confidence that we'll disagree with them in the way that is trying to be informative and trying to have fun with it, and we're not like mad at them. So Kris, I hope you also take that away from this discussion Charlie and I had.
Yeah, I'm never mad. I like to get rowdy.
You just get fired up. Yeah. It's not anger, it's just passion. Speaking of someone we're both passionate about, we're going to wrap up tonight's episode with a patron thanks. So we're on Patreon at patreon.com/sciencesortof. And if you donate at the Avogadro's Army level or higher, one of the things you get in return for that monthly contribution to the show is a thesis title made up on the fly based on the topics discussed in the episode. So Charlie and I are going to do that for the one and only Billy Nitro. Have you done one of these, Charlie?
Yeah, I have.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
The topics are petrofabrics.
We can do petrofabrics. We can do dinosaur beaks. We can do climate change. Like maybe a sociology study of climate change denialism. Like it can be a combination of some, all, or very little. It's like Chopped. You can use a little or a lot.
Okay.
So what are you thinking? What do you thinking Billy would do his thesis on? And he is Billy Nitro, so maybe nitroglycerin or like nitrogenation of the atmosphere, methylation.
Say that one more time. I was busy, lost in thought. He was doing.
Well, his name is Billy Nitro.
Oh.
And so maybe like something about like nitrogen in the atmosphere. Like maybe he went with some sort of, he used his own name as inspiration for his thesis.
Yeah, I don't know. Unraveling deceptions using dinosaur beaks, petrofabrics, and nitro estimates to counter climate deniers. That doesn't work.
How about like if we can convince the public that dinosaurs had beaks and feathers, like convincing the public that dinosaurs had beaks and feathers, tools applicable to teaching climate skeptics about climate change. Like maybe he did like a project where he like tried to take people who think the dinosaurs have to be big scaly lizards, and he like used all these cool tricks and outreach and teaching tools to make them convinced that dinosaurs are these feathery beaked bird things. And so now he's like writing a thesis on how you do that for climate change skeptics and deniers.
Okay, how do we condense that into a sentence?
Let's see. Breaking the pop culture bubble. Tools to convince the public that dinosaurs had feathers and beaks with applications towards climate skepticism outreach. How's that?
Yeah, what was the first thing? Something public?
Breaking the pop culture bubble.
Let's say unraveling the pop culture fabric to get the petroweave in there, or petrofabric in there.
Nice. All right. Billy also sent a note about switching. So Billy was a PayPal donor, a recurring donor for a while. So we probably have already I know we've thanked him before because Billy Nitro's great, and he sent in a voicemail one time, and he's got a mellifluous radio voice, which everyone should go back and find that episode. I'm not going to look at what episode it is. You should listen to all of them. But he wrote me a quick note about switching to Patreon, and he said, hey, Ryan, or whoever happens to read this, I've been thinking about switching to Patreon from PayPal for months now, and after the shout-out in episode 266, I felt embarrassed enough to finally get it done. Listeners, consider this a call to action for those still considering donating to the show. Come on, all the cool kids are doing it.
Nice.
Good old Billy Nitro. Whew, well, we went on a little longer than I anticipated, but I think it was quality content.
Yeah, and you can cut as much of the climate stuff as you want to. This is just stuff I get interested in.
I mean, this is your job. This is what you do.
So do you want to know? So stage 3 was, yeah, it's real. Yeah, it's humans, but it's not a problem. Stage 4 is, yeah, it's real and it's a problem, but we got this. We can solve it. We can adapt to it. So that's maybe true, but it's not going to be true for all 7 billion humans, and certainly not going to be true for like 90% of all species. And then stage 5 is, it's too late. Let's eat, drink, and be merry.
Ooh, that's grim.
Yeah. A lot of the oil CEOs or CTOs and oil people I've worked with, that's how they are. They're like, yeah, of course it's real. Yeah, we've caused it, but like, whatever. Like, I'm going to die in 30 years. Let's enjoy it.
That's the opposite of planetary stewardship.
Yeah.
Man, we need Mars colonies so bad, Charlie. Okay. I'm not gonna get on my Mars soapbox right now, but I am gonna tell you I got an email that the person said, I believe in ocean acidification, but not global warming. I'm like, it's the same process, my friend. It would not be acidifying the ocean if there was not excess carbon dioxide to then dissolve into the ocean.
Yeah, I don't know even what I just like. That's cute, I guess. keep learning.
I mean, it's sort of like it's sort of like the creationists who say like, well, I believe that we can make wolves into dogs, but I don't believe in evolution because I don't believe that you can change a species into another species. I'm like, well, I don't know how to help you if you believe that the process works, but the outcome doesn't. Like,
yeah, that's crazy.
I believe if I throw a ball in a parabolic arc towards a hoop and use the right amount of force and the right amount of spin, I just don't believe it's going to go through the basket.
Yeah.
But then how do you play basketball? Sports. All right, man. You got anything else going on in your life you want the people to know about?
Nope.
I can't even think about. I know I've got stuff to plug probably, but I can't even remember what it is at this point. But it is, it's the week of Thanksgiving here in America, here in, well, the United States of America. Canada already had theirs, and I don't think Mexico celebrates any form of Thanksgiving. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for listening to the show. And next week, I will be joined by Patrick to handle part 2 of my GSA interview. So you can look for that coming up, where you will get a whole lot more science. Sort of. Wow, Charlie. Where were you, Charlie?
Staring out my window.
Oh, gets so wistful towards the end of these episodes.
Yeah.
Visit sciencesortof.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the hosts, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort of is brought to you by the Brachiolobe Media Network of podcasts, with audio engineering by Tim Dobbs of the Encyclopedia Brunch podcast. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort of.
At least I'm biking to do errands, so a little bit of health there.
And lower carbon footprint.
Yeah, this is a discussion for another time, but I've been meaning to ask you if it would be possible to have like the worst diet imaginable. Like, could you eat a diet that is so carbon heavy that you could offset biking around instead of having a car? Like, you could still have a worse footprint because of your diet.
Have I already told you this? Like, that's the first day of my energy and society class.
No, you haven't told me that.
Yeah, so I start out the whole class with a group discussion and argument. Because, I mean, I'm on the West Coast and people are super judgy, as are people in DC. And so I asked, who emits more carbon? Or I asked, who uses more energy? I should look at the carbon angle. And I say a person with a vegan diet that drives a Ford F-150 Raptor that gets like 10 miles per gallon.
But it's a pretty sick truck.
It's a sick truck.
If we're being honest.
There's a reason I know so much about it.
Yeah. Right.
Versus a ketogenesis dieter that cycles to work.
And what's the answer? Or do I have to come to your class?
In general, it's the Ford F-150 uses more energy, but it's only by like a factor of less than 2.
Oh wow. Yeah, see, I was gonna paint this scenario where like all I eat is Wagyu beef and Ecuadorian quinoa and Bordeaux.
I bring that all up in the class, and I was saying like, it depends on this keto diet, or if they only are eating like aged Wagyu beef, then it's probably gonna get pretty significant.
Versus if they've got a chicken coop and they're killing their own chickens out in their yard.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyway, let's do the show.
Cool.